Hello, this is James Valvis, and today I'll be giving you a new poetry feature. This time, the author is Justin Hamm. Justin is a terrific author from the Midwest, Missouri specifically, I believe, and his writing has had a tremendous effect on me personally, and I believe many people, and will continue to do so. Also in this feature, you will notice that his photography is being featured, and so you'll be seeing those pictures go by, including those pictures of himself. Almost all of these were taken by Justin. In the description below, you will find links to Justin's books and his photography, and I hope that you'll check those out on your own and go forth and buy some prints maybe, or buy a book. These would be a great compliment to Justin and a much deserved tribute to his work. The best way you can support a writer is always by purchasing their material, or any kind of artist for that matter, including a photographer. And so I hope that you will do that. If nothing else, I hope that you will go and send him a little note to thank him for his wonderful accomplishment as a writer and as a man, and to do that immediately after you listen to this, because otherwise you'll forget. I know I always do. Okay, before we begin, I'd like to start with a caveat. I'm going to be focusing here specifically on place, on the Midwest, where Justin comes from. This is not to say that Justin is merely a Midwestern writer. When I say merely, what I mean is that although he is definitely a Midwestern writer, and while that is a compliment in my eyes, no writer is merely any one thing. And so to some degree, we have to look at these things in piecemeal. But Justin is a large writer. He is not just a single specific typecast writer, and so that should be kept in mind in all these comments I'm going to be making. Anyway, I'd like to start off by reading Justin's bio that is on his webpage, and I hope that this will inform you of where he's been and what he's doing presently a little bit, and then we'll get into more of the commentary. Justin Hamm, originally from the flatlands of central Illinois, now lives near Twain Territory in Missouri. He is the founding editor of the Museum of Americana and the author of American Ephemeral and Lessons in Ruin, as well as 2 poetry chapbooks. His poems, stories, photos, and reviews have appeared in Nimrod, the Midwest Quarterly, Sugar House Review, Pittsburgh Poetry Review, and a host of other publications. Recent work has been selected for the New Poetry from the Midwest, 2014, New American Press, and the Stanley Hanks Memorial Poetry Prize from the St. Louis Poetry Center. So there it is, short and sweet. Justin could have gone on and on about his publications. He's not that kind of guy, but there are many more that I know of personally. So that basically, I always say that there is nothing less informative about a poet than a poet's bio. It's just simply doesn't give the full story of that particular person or their particular art. It's basically there, just a thumbnail sketch of a person and their accomplishments. And I want to talk about Justin as it relates to place, as it relates to the Midwest specifically, as it relates to America overall. These are things that I sometimes struggle with myself. And I say I struggle in place because I've moved around a lot. I don't think if you move around a lot, place gets very much into your soul than if you're in a place where it's generally geologically and geographically and culturally similar. I grew up in New Jersey, and I lived my first 20 years there, and then I moved to Florida, and then I went in the Army, and I was in Illinois, and I was in Indiana, and I was in a bunch of other places. And then I moved back to Florida, and then I moved to Michigan, and then I moved to, and then I moved to here near Seattle, and I've been here for the last 20 something years, but I've hardly ever looked up from my desk, and so it doesn't seem like this place has the kind of hold on me that other places have. I actually feel closer to Chicago than I do Seattle because I feel like I spent more time in that particular city. Anyway, Justin has not got this problem. He is deeply rooted in the Midwest, and he's moved around a little bit, but not so far or so wide that it has caused any kind of schizophrenic viewing of place the way I have. I greatly appreciate this as a reader. Since it's a skill I don't have, or it's an experience I don't have, I treasure it. I think that that is something to be admired and something to be appreciated. It's not something to be imitated because I can't imitate it. I didn't live that life, and if I tried to imitate it, it would come across as false, but I greatly admire it. I think when it comes to place, I think the best understanding I have of place in a literary context is that it becomes its own character. It becomes almost a ghost that it stands in every room, that moves through every relationship, that has its footing in every bar and every grocery store. The place is almost a kind of a minor god when you've been in a place for a long time and it's kind of seeped into your soul. And the deeper that you look into that place, the deeper you look into yourself. This is one of the things why we see in, say, a New York writer's writing, someone like Lori Moore or that kind of person. These people have a very shallow level of place in their work, and it's a very shallow level of character ultimately as well. And this shallowness is masked by all this kind of mordant humor and this smarminess and this belief that they exist in the center of the universe. You don't have to go deep when you're in the center of the universe. You are the center of the universe. You don't get that with the flyover country writers. You don't get that in the past. You don't get it now. There is a deepness to them. It's a deepness that goes high and it goes low. And the more that you look into it, Nietzsche once said, the more you look into the abyss, the more the abyss looks back at you. And I think that there's a certain feeling in place, there's a certain connection to place, that the more you look up at the stars, the more you look inward to yourself, and the more that you see into other people, other characters. It comes hand in hand. That the place itself informs you of the people. I would like to go now to one of my favorite poems of all time. And I know that Justin Hamm is also a fan of this poem. We've talked about it a little bit. It's from Spoon River Anthology, which is the great Midwestern collection that is probably, to my mind, one of the greatest poetry collections of all time, and certainly of the early 20th century. There's nothing to match it in all of American literature, I believe, as far as a poetry collection goes. It's up there with Sherwood Anderson's, to Thornton Wilder's Our Town, which I'm going to talk about. But let me read you this poem, and then I want to talk about it a little bit. Lucinda Matlock by Edgar Lee Masters. I went to the dances at Chandlerville and played snap-out at Winchester. One time we changed partners, driving home in the moonlight of middle June, and then I found Davis. We were married and lived together for 70 years, enjoying, working, raising the 12 children, 8 of whom we lost ere I reached the age of 60. I spun, I wove, I kept the house, I nursed the sick, I made the garden, and for holiday rambled over the fields where sang the larks, and by Spoon River gathering many a shell and many a flower and medicinal weed, shouting to the wooded hills, singing to the green valleys. At 96, I had lived enough, that is all, and passed to a sweet repose. What is this I hear of sorrow and weariness, anger, discontent, and drooping hopes? Degenerate sons and daughters, life is too strong for you. It takes life to love life. Now, I think that, in a nutshell, gets to not just poetry of place, and not just poetry of the Midwest, but poetry in general. Poetry, to me, is a great celebration of life. It has to be. I don't think that you can write a poem that is not celebratory toward life. I don't think that you can pull it off. I think when you try to write a poem that degrades life, the art sinks and folds in itself and becomes something less than art. And this is where the Midwestern poet gets it right as compared to the smarmy, cynical, cosmopolitan writer. There is a deep appreciation of what is in this life. And poetry has to be about that. It has to be. Otherwise, who needs it? The Midwestern writer, as far as I'm concerned, and the Southern writer to some degree, the writers of the hinterlands, the writers outside the cosmopolitan surface level writers, the writers who go deep into who they are, deep into their ancestry, deep into their families, deep into their townships and their communities. The people who are not rebelling against this, but are embracing it to a large degree. Those who love their neighbor. And I don't mean that just in a Christian sense, but I mean it in the sense that they have an affection for their neighbor. And they don't look down on their neighbor. They don't pity them on the one hand, or hold them in contempt in the other. These are the writers who will always matter, and who love life, and who sing in a way that's pleasing and true. Justin is this kind of writer. He is this kind of writer. And even when he sings about sad things, even when he sings about death, or about losing a battle with death, or losing a battle with disease, or any kind of struggle, there's still this great, great depth to the character and an embrace of life. Lucinda does not have an easy life. She loses 8 of her children before she's 60. 8! And yet, still she sings to the mountainside. That, to me, is where we get the greatest of American writers. And that's why we see almost all of our best writers come from the hinterlands. You know, Hemingway comes from Illinois, and Faulkner comes from the Mississippi, and Flannery O'Connor's from the South. And then you have, Mark Twain, who's a guy who's up and down the Mississippi. I want to talk about one more thing before I go. The play Our Town. And I think that this really sums up the great American understanding, the great middle American understanding, the small town understanding, the not cosmopolitan understanding of life and art in general. And it's at the very end of Our Town, and so it's kind of a spoiler, but I hope you've already studied Our Town and you've listened to it. If not, you really ought to very quickly. And Emily, the character, she's died, and she's gone to the afterlife, and she's in the cemetery with the other dead people, and she's able to look at her life in kind of a replay of her movie of her life. And she goes there, and she can't take it. She can't stand to watch it anymore. And she breaks down and she says, I can't go on. It goes so fast. We don't have time to look at one another. She starts sobbing, and she says, I didn't realize. So all that was going on, and we never noticed. Take me back up the hill to my grave. But first, wait. One more look. Goodbye. Goodbye, world. Goodbye, Grover's Corners. Mama and Papa. Goodbye to clocks ticking and Mama's sunflowers, and food and coffee, and new iron dresses and hot baths, and sleeping and waking up. Oh, Earth, you're too wonderful for anybody to realize you. And then she asked the stage manager, do human beings ever realize life while they live it? Every minute? And the stage manager says, no. The saints and poets, maybe, they do some. Justin Hamm is one of those poets who does some. He does often. And that's why you should appreciate him. And that's why you should read his stuff and love what he does. And you should appreciate the writers from the Midwest and the writers who are not the darlings of the academics and those who celebrate the cynicism and the darkness of and the shallowness of shallow people. You should go there and you should appreciate what gift you've been given here by a craftsman who has gone deep into his home and his family and himself. And I do hope that you enjoy these poems as much as I have, and that again you'll support his work that will be linked again below. And so, okay, that's the introduction. Let's read the poems. Payphones in the Underworld by Justin Hamm. My best friend texts me a picture of a letter my mother sent him the year she died. He had forgotten about it and wants to know whether I want it for myself. But the power isn't so much in the ownership. It arises from the surprise in seeing the long loops of her letters unexpectedly, how they seem to carry the very sound of her voice. The dead know these things. At just the right moment, they leave off from doing their secret dead doings and find a payphone, fish around for change deep in the pockets of their burial suits. The call comes through, and on this end I pass a Camaro just like the one Mom rose hell with when we were kids. Or the V.C. Andrews novels stacked at the community yard sale resurrect in my mind the rhythm of her breathing as she read evenings by yellow lamplight in our smoky trailer. But it's no use calling them. The dead almost never answer. You only tie up the line as they stand patiently by, tapping bony fingers to skulls and waiting for the ringing to stop, so they know for certain the need for a reminder has ripened. The Farmers at Their Morning Coffee by Justin Hamm. Hear what news passes their lips between the slow ginger sips from steaming plastic cups at the local Hardee's. Hear the coded odes to past courting prowess, the ballads of Mesozoic like fish, caught not by pole but old-fashioned Lincoln-style wrestling. Uniformed in shirt sleeves and mesh-back feed company hats. They tell of coon dogs treeing iguanas, old flood stories to rival Gilgamesh or the Bible. They tell in hushed voices of witch wives who watch and hear from afar the truth of a man's heart. Was another pitiful year for the crops, says one. Too wet to plant in the spring and too dry to grow in the summer, says another. This one's circulatory piping has clogged up again. And now the cold, too, has returned. They all agree it really is the deep kind that settles into earth and old bones alike. Things are always just a little bit worse than they were this time yesterday morning. Still, it must feel good to be so old and alive on this frosty morning, to drink such hot coffee, and perhaps pick over a rubbery breakfast platter while curing the literal truth of its shameful lack of color, here at this table where all the seats are filled for only God knows how much longer. Rebecca, Just When the Drought Was Ending, by Justin Hamm. But the best thing about Rebecca was the way she floated always beneath the scent of woodburn and dusty middle America. Her keen ranch queen convictions slicing deep and deeper into the tiniest of daily miseries, with skepticism, demanding always some proof before she'd concede this life he pieced together for us cell by cell with ever shakier god fingers contained even one malignancy. Every bow-legged young bull rider, every sunburnt farmer of some day who'd stop by to mend a fence or just to offer genteel salutations would see her backlit by sunset, dream her into his own mother, and pray to the essence of the prairie to do what old bones could not. And it worked. She survived well enough to give of herself 4 more seasons among luckless kinfolk who every one drank greedily the blood she squeezed and felt the cracked lips of dry times less. As long as there was some great need into which she could empty herself, she could will the heart to continue, and none of the rules of dying applied. But she must have seen that the new rain wasn't baptismal or meant for her restoration. When those storm clouds finally swelled and burst into fat, miracle drumbeats, she must have felt the change was coming on. Why else open the windows so wide with no thought for the evening chill? Why else cut 100 wildflowers and arrange them into fiery clusters, but pour no water into their vases? Hi again, this is James Valvis, and I hope you've enjoyed this foray into the wonderful poetry and photography of Justin Hamm. If you like this feature, please check out some of his stuff. Again, once more, there are links in the description. Also, I would hope that you would subscribe to the channel. There will be other poetry features like this. I also publish my own poems from time to time. I plan on publishing the poetry of other people, not just featured like this, but also individual poems in the near future. So I hope you'll like, comment, subscribe, share this feature with as many people as you can. Get Justin's work out there, share the channel, enjoy the poetry, all the poetry. There's many wonderful poets out there doing incredible work, and you should appreciate them because they get very little press and they work very hard at what they do to make poems that enlighten us and enrich our lives. And we should be grateful for that, and we should try as best we can to support those people. Once again, I hope that you will like, comment, subscribe, share this work, and as always, thank you for listening, and God bless you.